Good morning again, and welcome to Qdabra's weekly webinar. Can you hear me now? This is Patrick at Qdabra. If you can hear me, please raise your hand, and thank you very much. And this is audio before I record. We are recording. Welcome to our weekly webinar. Glad to have you here. It's definitely cold in Seattle, and I've got a bit of a cold. If my audio sounds too loud or too scratchy, please just chat me, and I'll try to accommodate you. We've got a couple really cool, actually I have 5 really cool demos for you today. They're not all FormsViewer specific, they work in InfoPath as well. But I do want to ask you a few questions first. We've got 2 very short polls, and I'm just going to launch the first one here. Many of you have heard about our InfoPath 2016, our replacement for InfoPath. It's called FormsViewer. We'll do a quick poll here. And it looks like a lot of you have heard about it. We're 50-50 on the first 2 questions right now. And it looks like we have a couple that are interested. Thank you very much for responding. So about a quarter of you are using it, about a quarter of you are interested, and the rest of you are evaluating it. So that's great. Let's actually switch to the next quick poll. And this one is specific to really what we're doing today. Which demo do you want to see first? We've got 5 demos, and you may want to see all of them. We're going to show all of them, but just want to get some idea of which demo today you're interested in. I'm going to talk about the pros and the cons for each of these techniques. It looks like we have a couple people on the drop-downs on the fly, and we've got one person now on the buttons on top, and a couple more people have voted. So it looks like I'm just going to give it 5 more seconds maybe. Okay, so it looks like the most interesting one is the drop-downs on the fly, so we'll do that first. And then we'll do the add or delete from the table, that's the second one. And then we have clone existing and validating, and nobody cares about copying multiple items. Well, I'll tell you why that's important here in a second. We'll just close that poll and get back to our webinar here. And hopefully you can see my screen. So I've got a very short slide deck today. Can you see my screen? Where is my screen? 1 second. It helps if I share the right screen. Okay, we're back. So my very short slide deck is, yes, we are doing the next version of InfoPath, FormsViewer, but it is essentially a replacement for InfoPath. For those of you who are worried, we have a replacement for you. It takes your existing form as is. Very minimal, if any, changes are required. We've added a whole bunch of new features. We're going to talk about a few of them today. We've been talking about them over the last couple of years now, and we have, as we just saw, several of you are using FormsViewer. Thank you very much. We've got about 25 people that have adopted it now, and we're looking to increase that number dramatically over the next year. It is our tool for existing customers to make sure your forms have a future. And future-proofing, of course, is really important in these day and ages. Things change all the time on 365 especially. So here are the main benefits here. It's faster, it's better, it's got support for you from us, and we pride ourselves on giving you great support. So today's demos, we're going to start with the last one here because that's what everyone's interested in. In fact, with no further ado, I'm going to switch to Chrome where I have these forms all uploaded to my FormsViewer here at my demo site. I'm just going to quickly show you this form, and then I'm going to show it to you in the designer and show you how I did it. But first, let's take a look at the demo. So this is a pretty cool technique. I'm just going to, I think what I'm going to do is, well, you can see it. So I've got a form, a very simple form, and for each of these demos today, I've got the title here. I've got basically the demo. We're going to be adding multiple items. And as I'm adding multiple items to my drop-in, you can see that it is actually hiding the item that was selected. So let's try it one more time here. If I select feline whisker, making a witch's brew here, you can see that the next time it's not in there. So how do we do this? First of all, why would we care? Well, it prevents duplicate selections. We had a customer last week that was trying to do validation on a drop-down in their form, in FormsViewer, and she couldn't do it because FormsViewer doesn't support validation rules yet. But it's very easy to do this with a regular conditional rule. In fact, Of course, we could add additional items here. This is just a really rich soup here we've got going. So you can see here, as I add new items, it's going to add them up above. So this is where it's pulling the list from, these two ingredients. And of course, you wouldn't necessarily show this on the form, but you might have a secondary data connection pulling from a list, and then your drop-down would make more sense. One of the benefits here is that you can use it sort of as a progress meter to as people are filling out your form, they kind of know they've only got one item left, right, and then they're done. The other thing is, it reduces the amount of items in the list. It's easier to find the one you want, and also well, it prevents the duplicate selection, obviously. And of course, you want to know Hillary's cool XPath trick. So let's take a look at that. So here is the form in the designer. And once again, we're still using InfoPath 2013 Designer. Microsoft has pledged to support us until 2026. We are working, Qdabra is starting to work on a forms designer, a browser-based forms designer. We probably will have something out next year. Mainly, we're going to be looking at keeping your forms basically a backup option just in case Microsoft has some kind of bugs with designer, but we're not expecting that. So we're continuing to use the designer without any fear. Here's the form. Notice that here's my drop-down. There's no rule on the drop-down. So we've taken out, the validation rule that we had, and what we're going to be doing instead is adding this filter to the drop-down list box. And the filter is basically, I'm going to actually run my Zoom it here so you can see what I'm doing. I've got a little tool that zooms my screen, and I should have started this before the webinar. Okay, so now you should see here that we've got this very simple data source, just really stock. I've just created this from the fly, but I've also got a rule here, and this is what I want to show you. This is the secret sauce that Hillary has given us, and I'm just going to copy this in Notepad so you can see it in all its glory. So basically what this is it's an XPath command, and it's the not. Basically we're saying if the current one is equal to any items from that field where we have all the ingredients, then don't display it. Actually, this is from the field that we've selected. So if the basically it removes it from the drop-down, it filters it out if it's already been added to field 1, and field 1 is, of course, that's the field that we're selecting there in the repeating drop-down. So this is only really valid when you have a repeating section, which a lot of you will have, and you have a drop-down inside of it, and then you want to remove them. So that's the technique. You're going to get all these samples as part of the webinar today, so you can just go in here and copy this out. You're going to want to replace this second piece here with your XPath. And for those of you who are like, well, how did he add that? Let me show you once again how to do this. So you're going to go into the drop-down list box properties. You have to pull the values either from your data source, your main data source, or from a secondary data source like a SharePoint list. And then you're going to filter. And what you're going to do is you're going to select the expression. You might have some fields here in this drop-down, but you're going to select the expression, and then you're going to type in, you're going to copy in that field. Now you may be saying, well, Patrick, I don't know how to get this XPath here. No worries. What you do is you just go in here and right-click on your field in the data source and click Copy XPath. Now what that's going to do is it's going to give you the end of it, right? So that's going to give you the last piece. You're still going to need to prefix the beginning with this XDX document. That's the Hillary secret sauce there that will get you what you need. Okay, so that's the first demo. Any questions on that? Next up, we're going to switch to add and delete items. Actually, I think that was the second one in the poll. So let's go take a look at our second demo. So once again, this is really a cool technique, and we have customers using it. Last week we had a customer ask us about this, and that's why we're showing it to you. Next one is adding and deleting. We've done this demo before. Certainly it's part of our training class, and really once again we're showing you this in FormsViewer. I'm going to just type in some values here. Hello and goodbye and go. Only other language language I speak is Japanese, so we'll do that. So we've got 4 values here in this table. And of course you could have other columns here, whatever. And the key technique here is we're using a button to add these rows at the bottom. And we're using an X to delete them, and we're using a plus on the right to insert them. So, and these buttons obviously could look a little better. This is just my quick demo here, but the idea is that you can customize the buttons, whereas you can't customize the out-of-box widgets in InfoPath. You can make these picture buttons, you can make them look good, you can add conditional formatting to hide, basically, when you hover over it'll change the color. I mean, there's lots of things you can do in the browser with these buttons, and they look better, they're easier to find, they're easier to discover than the remove option, and also it makes it easier because it's a one-click operation. So how did we do it? Okay, so here's my form in the designer, and you can see that each of these is just a stock button. And what I'm doing is I've got a command, and this is one of the benefits of FormsViewer is you get all of QRule's commands without having to worry about having QRules in the form or on the site. You don't have to worry about the sandbox. So you're going to be adding a command, and basically what we're doing is we're just going to, when I click on that plus button, we're going to insert a child, which is using the group node here, underneath our parent group node, group 1. So I didn't really name my group nodes anything very interesting. So that's a very simple command. It automatically just inserts 1. If you want, we can insert 2. We can say count equals 2. We could also put a conditional formatting rule on here that says once we get to, let's say, if count is equal to, and what I want to do is use an expression here. And I want to say the count is equal to the, let's say, let me just do this. I need to actually get the XPath first. So I want to get the count of group 2, and I want to make sure that if it's greater than, I only want to give them 10 options to add. Let's make it 5 to make it easy. So limit to 5. And what you're going to do is you're going to add a condition, and the expression is count of this is less than, it's greater than or equal to 5. Let's just say greater than 5, greater than 4. Then what we're going to do is we're going to disable the control. Okay, so now I've made a change to my form, and I'm going to publish it to FormsViewer. And this is one of the other big benefits of using FormsViewer is it's very easy to publish. So I'm going to go back to my Manage Templates. I'm going to click on this one here, which is where I want to upload it, and close the one I have open. And I'm just going to drag and drop that new form to FormsViewer, upload it. Very quick. Okay. I actually want to upload anyway. Okay. And let's just look at this. See if I got my rule in here. So now if I add, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's not adding, it doesn't look like it took the change. Maybe I forgot to save it. Let's save it again. We're going to call it, I'll just call it add rows 2. And let's just make sure that that is doing the insert with the count of 2 here. Okay, let's try it one more time. Add rows 2. And I'm just using Chrome, but you can use IE just fine, or Safari or whatever. And let's drag and drop this over and try it again. Okay. So now when I click plus, it's going to give me 2, right? And it's going to be disabled when I hit 5. So that's how you do that. And of course, there's a bug there. It's letting me do it on this button because I forgot to do the conditional formatting here. But it's limiting this other one. So to do this one on the plus here, you just do the same conditional formatting logic so that you don't have them inserting values in the middle here. Okay, so that's the second technique. Let me show you how we do the delete here. On this button, it's basically the same kind of a command. In this case, so we're using the concat, and the reason for that is that we want to delete a specific item. So to delete a specific item from group 2, you have to use these square brackets. You use a square bracket, and then you're going to be putting the count of the item inside of it. And this is the dynamic value field 4 here. And that count is, of course, automatically getting calculated using a command. And that command is count of preceding sibling. Everyone should know and love this by now. It's a very common command. This just automatically numbers the items in your view. Okay, that's demo number 2. Any questions on that? Okay, so we're going to go on to the next demo. And the next demo is going to be cloning existing items. Well, this is actually really kind of an interesting demo. This was my bonus demo today, but some of you are interested in it. So here I have our stock expense report from InfoPath 2007 here. And of course I could add in a business purpose, whatever. What I'm going to show here is how to copy an existing template. So I actually have a library where I have existing forms out there. I've submitted 2 expense report forms, and I'm just using the naming convention of the year, the month, the day, and the time. This was submitted yesterday apparently, or the day before. And I've just got 2 items out here. Let me show you where this is first. I'm going to open up the form and show you that we have a data connection here that we're pulling these values from. And it's just on product testing. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to navigate there and show you what that looks like. And I'll just use IE for that. So I'm going to go to our product testing site, and we should have a library here called XML samples. So what this form is doing is, and ideally what you'd want to do here is you'd want to have it be the same library where you're submitting your forms to. Do we have any love from LastPass today? No, we don't. Okay, let's just log into our site here. And you can see here we've got this library with these 2 items here. So this is just a stock form library. Now ideally you'd want to submit to the same place because then they could clone expense reports that have already been added. Okay, so what this is doing is it's querying that library and it's listing up these 2 expense reports. Now these 2 expense reports are just expense reports. I can click on them and open them. But I can also copy them into the form. And when I do that, you'll see that it automatically copies in the purpose, the values. I can of course clone the second one if I'm interested, and it replaces those items, changes the values. And this is kind of cool because sometimes what you want to do is you want to reuse an existing one, kind of like a template in Word or a template in Excel. You want to have an XML that you're always using. Well, you can bake it into your new template so that every time they open they get that one. But if you have more than one, this technique is really useful because it allows you just to copy an existing, and then of course you could change it. So I have my new purpose, whatever, and submit the form. Let's see how we did this. So this one's a little more advanced than the others. We have, like I said, this is just querying the data source right here. It just queries that data connection that we just saw, XML samples, that's easy. And then if they click on clone, here's where the fun stuff happens. So there's essentially 2 commands here that we're doing. We actually have another data connection that is pointing to the actual XML that we want to get. And you can see here I've hard-coded in one of the values. And that's just so I can create the data connection. I want to hard-code the value in so that the data connection will be parsed by InfoPath. And then what I do is I change the connection. So if they pick a different one, we have to update the connection so it's not hard-coded to that hard-coded value, right? So it's dynamic, right? And what we're doing here is we're using this command called change connection URL, another one of the new FormsViewer commands, and it's taking and these are all, of course, documented in QRules. Once again, if you get FormsViewer, which is free, you get QRules for free. 45 of the top commands of QRules are baked in. This one, changing the connection dynamically, is really popular. You can see here that it's got a data source name of getXML. That's just from the data source tab. You just saw that. We're pointing it at this location here. We're saying the URL is this is the library, right? What we're doing is we're actually concatenating the title of the one they selected from the list. So that's how we change it. We just say change connection URL. It's very simple. Here's the one I want you to change, getXML, and here's the new URL. That's how simple it is. So once we do that, then what we can do is we can actually query that data connection. So we're not going to be querying getXML on load. Notice that we definitely do not want to check that box to an on load. You could, but then it would automatically, you'd do it again. You just do it extra. So you don't have to do it on load because you're going to do it again here after they've picked which one they want to copy. So we query the data connection there. And then the real interesting command, transform. This transform command is a generic transform command that will take, let me show you what this looks like in Notepad. Okay, so this transform command is another Curious command. It takes an existing XML, that's your source data source, and it has a couple kind of clever little options in here that copy the whole thing into your main data source. Now, and this is what the slash star stands for, is that is the main data source. In order to do that, we need to exclude the myfields root, and that's going to copy in all the values. Now, when you do this, you have to make sure that the XML that you're pulling in is the same XML that you're using. Otherwise, it won't work. It's also got this XSLT file. Now, this file, let me show you what this looks like. This file is actually a resource file. So you'll add this as a resource file here. And let me show you what it looks like. It's very simple. In fact, you can use ours for any form. It's totally generic. And that's really why this is a benefit to you. You don't have to actually create the XSLT. All you have to do is use the one we sent you, and it will work with any XML. So let's take a look at that real quick. And I'm just going to open it up in Notepad. Here's how simple it is, right? So basically, an XSLT allows you to copy XML from one place to another. And you can see here that this first thing just tells you this is an XML document. And then you've got, okay, this is a style sheet. All right, whatever. And you've got a couple namespaces in here. Once again, this is all boilerplate. And then you've got basically these commands here. You've got the template match, and you've got the closing tag. So the real interesting thing is this, and all it's doing is it's just copying itself. So anyway, like I said, this will work with any XML you have. This is not specific to ours. So you can just take it out of ours, plug it into yours, and you're good to go with this command. And this command, of course, will work as long as your source data connection is getXML. If you change it, just change it here. Okay, so that's the cloning. Any questions on that? Okay, a couple more demos for you. I'm going to go back to Chrome, and I've got copy multiple items. Now this is actually kind of interesting because there are times when you want to pull values in from a secondary data source, and you don't want all of them. And this is very common if you have a survey or a checklist, or you want to select, here are the approvers. You're going to query a list, and you could have more than 7 items in there, or more than 6. You could have, 100 or so, and you're going to have somebody select these items, right? And then you want to copy it into the main data source. So what we're doing is we're allowing you to select items and copy them in, and the main data source is the table here. I'll show you in a second. It's not fixed. In other words, it can be variable length. You can have 3 approvers, you can have 2. I can also go ahead and change these. Say Jimmy Rich Jr. And you can see it automatically updated the one that I changed. If I delete one, of course I can re-add it. So this gives us the ability to kind of manually select things on the fly and include them in the main data source. It's very useful for the data-driven design. Some of you have taken our class. It's a critical technique for that. But it's also great because it allows you to do something specific to the ones you've selected. Okay, so let's take a look at how we did this. just going to close my clone option here. And my drop down on the fly, we've seen that. And let's go to copy multiple items. Okay, so here's the form. And the form has a button. And the button is actually going to do two things. One is it's going to try to update an item if it already exists. And to do that, what we have to do, and you can see I'm using the main data source for both the from and the to, just to simplify things. But normally, you would be copying from a secondary data source. So what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, the rule to update, first we want to check to see if they've added the item before, we want to update it. The way we do that is we have to run a rule on all of the items that are existing in the to table. So first of all, we're going to set this update equal to false. Haven't updated it yet, and got to reset that value. We're going to copy the ID that we want to copy, and then we're going to actually set this trigger. Now this trigger, as you can see there, is setting the trigger field equal to a blank. Notice that that's different from setting it equal to nothing. Nothing, there's nothing selected there, right? So I'm setting it equal to blank first and then nothing. What on earth could I be doing? Well, what this does is it actually runs the trigger, because the trigger value is blank to begin with, there's nothing there, it's going to set it equal to space for every single row that's already been added to this table. And when it does that, as you can see, it's going to run this update if pre-existing rule on the right here. And what this rule is doing is basically it's just copying the values if the ID is equal to the one that's already there. And then it just copies it using the ID as a filter, as you can see here. And then it sets update to true, and then it's done, and then we've updated it. Now if the update succeeded, we skip this insert at the bottom. But if it didn't succeed, if it's a new item, we're going to run this command, as you saw just a moment ago, to insert an item into that table down below. And then we have another rule on the table that actually copies the values. Okay. Actually, I've got this hide if blank. I don't need this anymore because I'm not using default values for my table. So once again, and you can see here that I can add these, change them around, and so on. So that's how that works. This rule is the insert rule, so when a new row gets added, it automatically copies the values, and it updates the inserted count. So that's pretty much all there is to it, and that is how you copy items from a secondary or main data source table to another table in your form. Very easy to do. Of course, you could do it in batch. You could have them select a whole bunch of items and have one button to copy them all. That's another technique that works really well. In that case, you would insert the number that were selected, and then you would just copy them over one at a time using that trigger technique. Okay, so any questions on that? Last demo is the FormsViewer validation. So this one here, one of the things we have not implemented in FormsViewer yet is validation. So when we say validation, what are we talking about? We mean like in this form here, I can add a rule. If it's a text box here, I can add a rule to validate, right? There's a validation rule. These validation rules are not supported yet in FormsViewer, and we may do it in 1.4 or 1.5. Right now we're on 1.23. We're going to be releasing 1.3 here in probably another month or so. We've been updating it as we have blocking issues, and if you go to FormsViewer online and you take a look at the Manage Templates page, at the very bottom you'll see the current version is not displayed here. On your server, this is apparently our production instance. It's a little bit different than yours, but you will see, actually, is it on this screen? Maybe it's on the previous screen here. Yeah, there it is. So it's at the very bottom of the initial screen, and this is, of course, the October 14th build, less than a week old. So we do update this about every 2 weeks or so if we see something that's worth updating. Of course, we're very careful to do that. So from here, let's just go back to the form I wanted to show you now, the validation form. This is the same form you just saw, but it's got 3 fields I want to validate. So we can't use validation, so what are we going to do? Well, I'll show you in a second, but let's just type in some values here. As I'm typing, you can see the formatting just works just fine, and now the button is selected. So that's kind of how you want to do it. The benefit is that it works around that limitation, obviously, and it shows the feedback to the user. So unlike the typical InfoPath story, which is you click submit and you get an error, they can't click it until their form's valid. So that's another benefit of using this technique, even for stock InfoPath forms. And you could, of course, use conditional formatting. How did we do it? So you can see here, I have a conditional formatting rule to highlight these if they're blank. For the radio button, you have to do it for the section, the entire section, and you have to put the radio buttons in a section that is bound to the radio button. And for those of you who haven't done that before, you can actually add sections to any of these items. So for example, if you want to add a section for the radio button, come on, delete, you would just click on more, and you can add a section here, and then what you would do is you would paste in the middle of it your control, and then you would set the section equal to highlight. And of course now you can see I've lost it, but this is what I had earlier. Okay, so and then the key trick here is on this button we have a conditional formatting rule that is going to disable it if any of these values are not set. So what we've done is we've added this group node to our form. So this is one of the downsides of this technique, is you actually have to add a group element to your form. It's okay, InfoPath will let you do that without invalidating any of the previous forms. As long as you add it to the form, it's okay. And then underneath this, you're going to have any fields that you want to validate. So you can see we have 3 fields we're validating. And then for each of these fields, you have to add a rule to set those values. Basically, it's a really simple rule. If the control gets changed, then you just set it. So it's just always going to fire. It's always going to set the value for the drop-down value in that form validation. And then the beauty of that is typically this works really well if you've only got 10 or 20 items you need to validate in your form. If you've got 100, so if you've got just if the number of fields you want to validate is less than 10 or 20% of the total fields in your form, this is a good technique. And the reason for it is because this one rule here at the end is generic for any form. Let me show you what this looks like. So this is a complete stock InfoPath rule. It's called the floor. Basically what we're doing is we're saying count all of the items underneath form validation, those specifically that are not blank. And if that's less than the count of all the items underneath form validation, then we know we have items still to fill out. So we want everything to be filled in, so this filter will only count the ones that are not blank. So if it isn't filled in, it's blank, and the count will be less than this second value here. And this command, like I said, is generic to any form, and all you have to do is change this location. So wherever you add the form validation, it'll just change it there, and you'll change it here, and then this formula will work on your forms. And the benefit is it's just one formula. You don't have to worry about don't have to worry about like doing one rule if V text box and not V drop down and not V radio button. You don't have to do a whole bunch of rules. You just have one. So that's the simplification there. And that's pretty much it for my demos today. I do have a couple more slides to show you. If you have questions, now's a great time to ask them. And I'm going to switch to basically give you a little bit of, we've got FormsViewer adoption going on right now. We're interested in helping you. Like I said, it's 0 to minimal migration cost. We have additional features. The forms are much faster than InfoPath. And we're adding more features. Obviously, like I said, we will support you and help you with the migration. We're the only ones out there that have a 0 to minimal cost migration. There's no license fees. If you want support, you do have to buy a support plan from us, but they're really inexpensive, and they just go to hours, so we're not charging you anything in addition to that. If you wanted to download the 365 version of FormsViewer, just go up to infopathdev.com. Let me show you where that is. and you're going to just go to infopathdev.com, and underneath downloads, we have FormsViewer. You can download it, you can install it today, and there's documentation on how to configure your existing form libraries. We have a separate instance in Europe for our European customers. It points to a different server. We're going to be consolidating these in the future so that you won't have to do separate versions for Europe, but right now we have a separate version for Europe. And this file here will show you how to configure it, and we'd love to have you as part of our FormsViewer program, and lots and lots of features. There's a few limitations. I've covered these in a previous webinar. I want to thank you for joining me today, and let's see, are there any questions? Looks like we have no questions. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining. I'll get this package out. There's a quick 4-question survey at the end, and you'll get all these samples, and these samples will work just fine. They're very self-contained samples. There's the one that does the cloning. You'll have to update the data connections, but everything else is pretty self-contained. I hope you guys have a great day, and thanks for being here.